Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guests, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here today. Tonight, we are going to be talking about communication. How do you get your point across? Do you really say what you mean? Do you really mean what you say? We look at the elders, and they were all kinds of words. They would say things like, until the cows come home, or they'll say, I'm really going to get you, or, the peanut gallery. All of these little conversations, innuendos, we know right what generation they came from. But then we look at the young people now, 20s, 30s, 40s. They really didn't carry those comments, those phrases, those kind of little, I call them joyous little things of our ancestors forward. They've kind of dissipated them. We look at the youngsters, and they say what they mean, they know what to say, and they get their point across. What is communication all about throughout all of these decades of life? Are we dwindling away from the way things used to be? Or are we perhaps trying to hold on to some of the phrases of our ancestors just for dear life to give us a story of the lifetime we have all passed through? Today, my guest is Stephen Joseph. His book is Cranky Super Powers, Life Lessons Learned from the Common Crankosaurus Chronicles. Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So glad to have you, Stephen. I think, we look back at communication, and even in this, I would say probably just the past 40 years, it's really gone on warp speed, don't you think?
Yeah, I listened to your introduction, how people talked before, how people talk today, and a lot of what, the inspiration for this book is a lot of phrases. I'm an attorney during my day job, and, coming across phrases during my day job, and I get inspired. That's a story. That creates a story. That creates something to talk about.
Yeah. I wrote on the front page, Cranky Super Powers, I wrote, moving that bike chain to adventures through the rust and the rain. I think it's always when we're trying to say something, but we put all of these things around it. Well, it's sort of like, I'm angry, but, and then you get the but, and then it's all this other stuff. But that's what creates a scenario. That's what creates a story. That's what creates a terrain, like the movie script. Don't you think, you go to a movie and you think, oh, it's absolutely great. You're there for 2 hours, but there's only one phrase that might sum up the whole movie, don't you think?
Yeah, no, it's just you get to one phrase, and that tells the story. Of course, with that, you hope that the one phrase, and I know when I'm writing, I have like one thought in my head, and typically I write when I'm a runner, so I'm running, and then I have this thought in my head, and then the other thoughts get onto that. So, and then it becomes more of a story. So, for example, in the book, like I have this interview with Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. Mr. Spock is interviewing for the job of first officer, and Captain Kirk says, "Will you give me your word that you will be loyal and faithful and to the Enterprise and all that stuff you need to be?" And Mr. Spock says, "Well, I won't give you my word. I can't give you my word." And Captain Kirk is dumbfounded. "What do you mean you can't give me your word?" And he tells a story about on the planet Vulcan, there was a leader who kept saying, "I give you my word," and until he gave all his words away, he couldn't speak anymore. So, and then a lot of other people would give their words, and they lost the ability to communicate. So the law became in Vulcan, and I made this up, is that you have to keep your word, you can't give your words. So, and that was just something, just like something personal. I have a daughter, and sometimes she doesn't keep her word, just that,
right.
don't tell her that. But yeah, that becomes a story. So it's great to have that one idea, and then the one idea then could develop into so much more.
Yeah, and then it really brings you back to what is exactly the point that's behind all of the flowery story, don't you think? In chapter 1 where it says getting on my nerves, and I always say you're getting on my last nerve, so to speak. Don't you think that a lot of people have said that? I'm almost 70, we all say that, and it's very common. You're getting on my last nerve, We would say that to our kids when they were growing up, and then the kids would turn around and say, you don't have any nerves, or I'm going to go up there and I'm going to push on her, It's sort of like, if you remember, there was always a saying, how many times you're going to stick your finger in that light socket before it shocks you, And, then we come up with the things, don't ever use wet hands on plugging something into the electric. So, or don't dare use the toaster if your hands are wet. It's all of these stories, I think, are about people's experiences as they learned how to be the human that they are today. So they were very important, don't you think? Story is.
I think the story, yes, absolutely, and it's funny. Some of these stories or the phrases, like somebody would say something, like a phrase like I've heard a gazillion times, and then I have to look it up and to get the origination of where that line came from. So, peanut gallery, where did that come from? And that goes back to times of segregation when African Americans had to sit up in the top of a theater, and that was called a peanut gallery. And they served peanuts because people didn't have enough money, and peanuts were the cheapest thing, and that became the peanut gallery. So it's interesting where these phrases come from, and there's so much, there's so much there that when I talk about crankiness, it's just it comes from that. So I had a friend who was saying, like, he was going axe throwing for the weekend. There was just some axe throwing. Axe throwing, that's weird. Never heard of that.
Right.
And then I was thinking of, axe to grind, which seems like kind of weird. Like, I'm going to go grind my axe. And again, that became a story that I have in the book that teaches, you have the axe to grind. You might end up grinding yourself at the end of the day. So with your last nerve, that will do it.
Yeah. When you talk about the axe to grind, I think of it, I liken it back to the stories of the old blacksmiths, okay? And they were standing there and they would be grinding or sharpening the axe. You think of, when they used to sharpen your ice hockey skates, that noise that kind of gets to you. And you see all the sparks flying. It's sort of like you see the blacksmith. Here's a story to concoct for you: is that you see the blacksmith doing this, or the person sharpening it, and they're holding it and they're looking at you just like, you want to mess with me? You know what I mean? I've got this sharp thing. It's sparks flying. It's hot, and it's going to cut something. And so when people say you got an axe to grind, it's sort of like, you're going to listen to me or else. You know what I mean? That's how my grandparents used to say it. I've got an axe to grind. You're going to sit there. You're going to listen, and that's going to be the end of the story. Don't you think?
Family, and was you had an axe to grind, we all ended up grinding it. So It was never, that was not it. No, it's just we just let everything out.
Yeah, interesting. I think it's different with so many different times of, the decades or where you grew up or where you lived. That really had a big influence, too, on the phrases that you've used and their influence, perhaps.
Yeah. No, it's just, it makes me think. Again, as an attorney, just a lot of different things. I listen to the words, and then I try to use the words. How do I make these words work for me? So I'm always paying attention to that, and then I end up having a lot of fun with it as well. So there's so many different stories. It's just I could get into with that.
It's interesting. I live here in New Orleans, but I grew up in Pennsylvania, and these things are so vitally different. It's just like in the movie, Sweet Home Alabama. You need a passport to come down here, because things are different. They are different the way they are said. They are different the way they are taken. I look in your book, and it says, it's grand reopening, new and improved. And I wrote on the top of the page, I'm going to do something different that maybe you'll like me. So sometimes I think that when we look at, they put up a news story and they say new and improved, it's sort of like, well, did we get more information? Or maybe I'm going to dress it up differently so that it'll be more accepted. Sometimes with communication, people are saying that because they want to be heard, but people aren't listening because they can't hear yet, right?
Yeah, I never thought of that way. It's just with new and improved, just nice shiny package. Here I am, notice me. And that's what, and a lot of times when they say, I make fun of that, it's new and improved, and I talk about toothpaste, and you see the active ingredient for the old toothpaste was fluoride, and then you look at the new and improved toothpaste, still has fluoride. That's the only active ingredient. So, that was fun to talk about. And the other point with that is the inactive ingredients, where you see there's one active ingredient, and then there's 20, 30 inactive ingredients. And then I think about myself and how many ingredients do I have in my own self that are inactive, and can I make them active? So just again, it's self-improvement. That's what that chapter is about. And I've lived many decades where I talk about in that chapter, what's always important to me is finding new normals, and sometimes it's an old normal, but you're repackaging that. So years ago, just a different story. I was it was December '87. I was around 240 pounds, and within a week, my girlfriend broke up with me. I lost my brand new car, got stolen, and then I got fired from my job, all within 10 days. And I proceeded to lose 85 pounds in 5.5 months. I went from 240 to 155. I started running. I gave up pastrami, chopped liver, triple-decker sandwiches, and I went to pickled herring, and I cut out fried foods. I cut out all that stuff, and started running. And the thing I talk about, a lot of people talk about finding good habits or new habits, and I talk about normals because habits to me is like finding a good parking spot. It seems to be temporary, and the normal is more like building a house. There's more permanency to it. So what are those normals you want to build, to create, that you wake up in the morning you don't even think about? It's just something you do.
It's interesting, Stephen. You had just said about the active and the inactive, and then you went on to this other story about your life. And I just likened the whole thing as a full circle kind of idea. When you see active and then all of these other inactive ingredients, I think of, they're all in there to support the other thing to get to market, to get to be effective, to get to be whatever it is. In other words, if you just put the fluoride in there, you have to have all this other stuff to kind of hold it up to give it substance. So same thing when you have a girlfriend and a job and a car and everything's, quote, supported. But then when it falls away, you need to find your own power so you could stand alone. So then all you need is the active ingredient, right? You don't need all the inactive ingredients to be your support system. You just learn your own empowerment, perhaps?
No, definitely. And, it kind of amplifies what those active ingredients are. The question I have when I see inactive, when I look at myself, and, there is the supporting. If I talk about supporting parts, I would put those just as active. They're needed. They're necessary. One can't survive without the other, so it becomes an active ingredient. Inactive ingredients is that you're not challenging yourself. You're not doing the things you need to do, and that inactive ingredient in you, again, could be activated, and it's just being more, feeling alive, more alive, as opposed to, let's say someone's just a couch potato. They're just sitting on the couch eating bonbons and not doing anything, getting off the couch, and the muscles are inactive, the brain is inactive, but these are these are ingredients that make a person that certainly could be activated. And okay, I'm going to start doing this, I'm going to start doing that. How can I make myself more active? Like those ingredients. So that's how I look at it, a little bit different.
Right. In your book, Stephen, you also talk about the chapter on hoping for the best, and you say it's one that never made sense to you. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. I live here in New Orleans. We have hurricanes all the time. And every year, we always say prepare for the best, too. But we're preparing for the outcome to be more powerful instead of preparing for the worst, which is destiny and powerless. So we always try to prepare for the best outcome. Do you think perhaps sometimes people confuse it and they say, I'm not really quite sure what I'm doing, but this is how I want to show up, more or less? Because a long time ago, they would always say prepare for the worst, worst scenario. But everything is the worst scenario. So if we put on a generator, it's not preparing for the worst that our electric is going out. We're preparing for the best so we can still keep our food or ACs working. So is it just a flip of the words or a perception that you're looking at?
No, definitely. With hoping for the best. Just see, and this is again with just my background as an attorney, where I manage other attorneys, and I hear all the time from attorneys, we hope for this, we hope that the judge will do this, we hope that this. They're talking about like an outcome, and it's all based on hope, and of course, the focus, you're handling this case. How do we prepare for the best? What steps can we take to prepare to get the outcome we desire? And not just talking about hope. And in that case, there's, when you're talking about the legal system and handling a case, there's no preparing for, you can't prepare for the worst. So, if you prepare for the worst, it means that you're not doing your job. How do you prepare for the best? So the conversation becomes like we crossed every T, we dotted every I, we took care of things. And one of the things this gets into my legal world, where I hear attorneys all the time, we will argue this, we will argue that, we will argue this. And I tell attorneys that arguments, and I teach negotiation. So I tell them that arguments take away your power. When it comes to negotiation, arguments take away your power. And I go, what do you mean? I went to law school and argue about all these things. That's why I love arguing. I love to get into argument. And the problem with that, you make an argument, as an attorney, and the other side will never say, oh, my God, I'm so surprised. I'm peeing in my pants. I never expected that one. It never happens. They're already prepared for all your arguments, and it's not that you don't argue. It's how you phrase it. When I have X, I can only have Y as a conclusion. This is what I have, and when I have X, I do Y, and that's it. So I'm not arguing with you. I'm just stating a logical conclusion, and the only possible conclusion when you have these set of facts. So that's the difference.
Yeah. Stephen, it's so interesting because after Katrina, everybody, when they build houses now, puts an axe in the attic, and when you think about it, the idea is if you can't exit your house via your door and you can only go up, everybody should have had an axe in your attic. It doesn't matter where you live. If there's a fire, you go up. If they go out, flooders go out. In other words, how are you going to get out is the answer. So it's just interesting, when we talk about that, Stephen, I saw this one chapter in your book, and I thought it was so interesting. Barking up the wrong tree. That was what I wanted to talk about. Let me tell you, I have had an acquaintance, and he has been saying that for the last 20 years, barking up the wrong tree. And I'm going, am I just not getting the message that that's just what it is. He's not going to change. Nothing's going to be any different. And you can blah, blah, blah all you want, but he is still going to be in his silo with his closed door. And don't you think sometimes when people say barking up the wrong tree, it's sort of like, as soon as you hear that, you want to go, oops, okay, time to go. Maybe? No, it's just if somebody's barking up, if they keep saying you're barking up the wrong tree, I guess I'll find another tree. I'm not going to worry about this tree. And in that story again, it's that chapter's about people listening to each other. And I had this story about the Barker family. And everybody, the whole family, would just say, like, you're barking up the wrong tree, and they're not being generous with each other. They're not taking care of each other. And again, they lose the bit because they kept everyone said bark up the wrong tree. They couldn't bark anymore after a certain point. So they had to get some therapy, and then they worked it out. And then because all they're doing is yelling and screaming at each other. They can't hear each other, right?
Yes, they're not hearing each other, which is always important.
In your chapter, you talk about no good news. And I wrote on the top of the page, what's wrong is news. How many times do you turn on the news just to see what happened, what fell apart, what blew up, what's bad out there? So in essence, what is news anymore, do you think?
News is not like I'm 63, so I'm not 7, but I grew up, with Walter Cronkite, and you actually got news. This is what happened, and then you would switch over from Channel 2 to Channel 4 to Channel 7, ABC, CBS, NBC. It seemed all the same. There wasn't, it's just like a different broadcaster, but it wasn't really playing to a different crowd that you find today. And then, of course, we get into a situation where you can't even trust the news. So it's a little different than it is today. So there's a question what becomes news overall, and that's a difficulty.
Yeah, because when you think about communication, are you really always, meeting up and having a talk because something's wrong, you got to fix it, so to speak, or they shouldn't have done it that way, or chastising, or hey, why didn't you listen to me? That kind of idea. Do you know what I mean? And you look back at it, And that's a similar way of conversation. You know, when my son calls me, he says, I said, well, I haven't heard from you in a while. And he says, well, I don't call you because you've got nothing to say. I said, isn't that fabulous? I don't have any drama. I have no drama. I have nothing that's been turning the wheel that I have to complain about. Isn't that great? You know, so I think the idea is that what is news about? I think sometimes it's about, do we want to hear the good in other people? Sometimes most people don't want to hear the good in other people. Do you think?
I think that people. I think that people are so used to it, or
right,
that they end up being shut down. But I think it's still important to hear like the good news and somebody says, oh, you have a baby. Oh, congratulations.
Right.
Oh, that's so wonderful. You know, oh, you're getting married. Oh, this is so nice. Yeah. So, yeah, there's this the Jewish word simcha, you know, like a celebration. Right. You know, it's just like, oh, wonderful. So, that's still people want that. People want the celebration. People want to hear that. You know, now we have the Olympics are going on like a couple months ago, and the celebration. Oh, we won the gold medal. Isn't that wonderful?
Mhm. Let's talk about the idea of tough going. You know, when I think about it, over the decades, if we look back how most of our elders were raised in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Life was not easy then, and they carried a lot of those experiences forward to tell us the stories so we could live our lives through those stories, and then we've done the same thing. So eventually those stories will wean their way out of existence. However, right now they are still in play because people are living longer. So, there's people in their 80s and 90s that are still telling stories to a lot of the grandkids that are still here. So we were hoping that it would dissipate, but I think it's starting to. So in other words, our children don't need to live through our stories or our tough times. My grandkids, they asked me, well, would tell us about, when you grew up. And I said, oh, it was great, but tell me about your day. Because I don't want them to live through my despair or pain or suffering or struggles or whatever. I don't need those to come forward. Do you think sometimes there are those people that would love to have it? It's like you can see them, like in the picture in your book, bringing them in a wagon, all of their stuff to say, see, I told you so. This is the way life is. It's hard. And it's about being able to communicate a change. Do you think we're at a brink of change?
I think, there's always change. But I don't mind. Like I look back fondly at growing up and looking now. I just you don't have it as like there's people. People when I was a kid, they went through the war, World War II. My parents, they suffered. Yes, people back then. A lot of people, they get disease, polio, a lot of different things back then. And you could say, oh wow, it's like you guys had it tough, and we have it so easy. And I look back. I tell people, I grew up in the Bronx, for example, and I would go to Bat Day at Yankee Stadium, where they hand out 50,000 bats, and half the people are inebriated, so they're giving out 50,000 weapons in the South Bronx to people. Half the people are drunk, and now you can't bring a bottle of water into a stadium. And like now it's like you have to scan it. But back then we're giving out baseball bats. So I look at that, or I look at like I was a teenager in the late 70s and then college in the 80s. And one of the wonderful things for a kid growing up in New York City was they had the Central Park concerts. And you could, and basically it was for orchestra seats for the top bands of the time. You know, just I could go into like whatever band you could come up with in the 80s, late 70s. They played Central Park, and orchestra seats were $3. And in the beginning of the summer, you know, they have the concert schedule. You buy like 20 concerts, like, you know, $60. And now it's like, you know, $500 to go to a concert. Is just so different. Or just even college. My daughter, like, I went to college and law school, and I paid more for one semester of my daughter's college than I did for 7 years of college and law school, including room and board and, you know, tuition. You know, it's just like that stuff where I thought, geez, like we had it good back then, and you guys have it. It's not as much fun now.
Yeah,
people are like too serious, and people are texting and taking things out of context and not listening to each other. And
Stephen, I look back, Stephen, on the decades, and I remember distinctly hitchhiking. People don't even know what that word means anymore. I used to hitchhike all the time when I was in college. You know, in the late 60s, early 70s, we were always hitchhiking because that was the way we had to get around. And now people are going, you mean you got in the car of someone you didn't know? I said, well, isn't that in fact the same thing as an Uber? You're getting in a car of someone you don't know, you know? Except now you're just paying for it. Before you just got it for free. And I think back on that, and you know, almost that conversation, if you want to stop a room dead in its tracks, that's a good one to have, you know? And we think about all of the things of the worries in our lives. Like back then, we didn't worry about being abducted, or we didn't worry about, you know, someone harming us, but now even so, with Ubers, you're having very similar experiences. So has the story really changed? Or maybe just the way we're looking at it, or the name we're giving it?
Well, there's a big difference. Hitchhiking, and you do see like movies nowadays. They still play like something, but in the '60s, you know, like somebody out in the South and somebody hitching a ride. So you still see it, but it's like it's really foreign. I go to Israel a few times a year, and people still hitchhike there all the time because I guess it's a different country, it's a different kind of community, but people still do it. It's really different. Or they're, you know, like kids actually help each other. They're running around. It's a different kind of culture, almost like what I remember growing up with. And like I would go on the subway by myself when I was 8 years old.
Right.
And now I know when my daughter was a child, you know, that never happened. So some things you know are so different today, and you know, a lot more cautious.
Yeah. When can you talk in your book about when the cows come home? You know, all the time. Oh, we talk about that all the time. Wait till the cows, you know, just wait till the cows come home or whatever. That means it's never going to get done. You know, just not going to get done. Forget about it. You're just wasting your time. And I think about that all the time. We say, is it ever going to get done? We'll say, well, then why are we really wasting our time? Are we trying to inspire somebody else by saying something? Are we trying to provoke them by saying it? Are we trying to push them away by saying something, perhaps? Yeah,
well, that is, you know, with the phrase, and this was, again, a work thing where I was at a mediation with a mediator, and the mediator, you know, of course, people are making their arguments, and she said, you could argue till the cows come home.
Right.
You know, so, or they won't listen. And that's, you know, the point is, well, you know, we're not arguing. We're just telling you what the facts are. But again, it's like people are shut down, and
Yeah.
they're, like you could argue the cows go and come home, they're not open.
Yeah.
Which is funny. Just in my prior book was A Grown-Up Guide to Effective Crankiness, and I had again this taken from a mediation, shoot the messenger crankosaurus, where
yep.
Don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger.
Right.
And the funny thing about that, I had a mediation where the mediator came in and gave whatever message the mediator was giving. And we were all over him. And he said, don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger. And my reaction was, and I actually, at first I wanted not to shoot the messenger, in my chapter. And I ended up saying, you know what, let's go ahead and shoot the messenger. And I even tell, I supervise people, and I don't want people to be a messenger. So if I needed a messenger, I used to be a messenger. I was in high school. I made minimum wage, and I was a messenger. This guy's getting $500 an hour to be a messenger. I don't need to pay somebody $500 an hour just to be a messenger.
Yeah.
You think for that you get a little bit more. So.
But if you think back, Steve, and really being in New York, that all comes to the ties of the time with the mob and stuff. So everybody was a messenger, and you were getting paid pennies to do it, but everybody had a messenger. In other words, if you were important, you had a messenger. You had someone that did your dirty work for you, right? Yes.
I guess, well, I didn't, of course, I never had anybody doing my dirty work.
Right. I think that sometimes, we see it in family relationships sometimes, when kids want something or the mother will say, oh, well, go tell your father this. And then the kid will go tell the father, and the father will say, well, go tell your mother if she wants to tell me, come tell me myself. You don't need a messenger in the middle. So sometimes kids always end up being the messengers, don't you think?
Yes. Yeah, kids get to be the messengers. Go tell your brother, blah blah blah. Go tell your sister. Yes. Go tell your father he needs to come to the table. Yeah. Always.
It's always. Yeah. Yes. Well, Stephen, in closing, I wanted to talk about this one. Don't get me started. Your book is really about getting started, is about bringing about phrases, bringing about relationships and stories and the way things were. And, you have everything in this book. It encompasses all of our ethnic ways. It encompasses the elders, the young, the stories, everything from generations gone by. And I think it's really important to say and finish with that is don't get me started, because we loved getting started today so we could walk through all of these times of our lives. I think when you sit with an elder, it's like, oh, get me started. When they say don't get me started, I'll say, oh, I want to hear. I think sometimes don't get me started is an opening to hear about someone's life story, perhaps.
Yeah, I never thought about that way. But yes, don't get me started. In that chapter, it was more about like a couple, like they kept saying, "Don't get me started," so they never communicated with each other. But the "Don't get me started" is a plea, like I've been keeping this in, and I really want to get started, and I want to just put it all out there, and I also want to be heard.
That's
and the thing about don't get me started is sometimes like if I get started, I know I'm not going to be heard the way I want to be heard.
Right.
So don't get me started. But in reality, I want to be started so badly. I want to be heard so badly. I want to feel that. I want someone to feel what I'm going through, to understand, to grasp, and give me a hug even after they hear all that. And yes, I want to get started. So absolutely.
As I work so much with patients at end of life, they want so much to tell their stories that most of the time it's with shame, guilt, really devastating things that have happened to them, a lot of regrets. And I sometimes say you need to find someone that's impartial, not of your family, that is not vested, in other words. And do tell your story. Get it off your chest or whatever. You know, it used to be the priest you could do that, but hey, everybody gets to be too friendly with the priest these days. I don't even tell the priest anymore, or else the church is gone anymore. So I think the idea is if you can find someone to be able to share that story, sometimes it eases you into the path of releasing your body and going into death so much easier. I see so many people fighting to stay on the earth because they're so afraid what God's going to judge them about, you know, because they have something in their life. So I think your book is an absolute asset to people if you have them in nursing homes, in elder care, assisted living, or anybody over the age 60, this book, Cranky Super Powers, hey, go drop off a few books of these books there, and it'll get the story started. So, yeah, get the story started, not don't get me started, right?
Yes. And, yeah, definitely. It's a get started. Just like, you know, and I even have like a different chapter, can't make this stuff up, Crankosaurus, which, you know, I say, you know, you want to make stuff up sometimes because can't make, and the phrase there, can't make this stuff up, is like, again, being an attorney, some crazy case, you can't make that stuff up. And I say it's the exact opposite. I'm going to wake up and have a cup of coffee. You are. Can't make that stuff up. It's the same stuff, same day, same thing, different day. You know, the rut we get in. So again, you know, people seeing that, hey, I'm, you know, get in that rut, and how do I get out of that rut? Or how do I tell my story? How do I create? How do I feel alive to be alive? And that's whether you're again, like a teenager, or whether you're 70, 80, 90, you know, just whatever, to have purpose and to look at things, and especially with older people who have so many stories that they haven't told, and that's an opportunity.
You know, Stephen, when I would put my kids to bed, we didn't read books because we didn't have much money for books at the time. But I would always lay down with the kids and they would say, tell me a story. They wanted to hear from me a story of my day, whatever it was. And I distinctly remember they were like they were 4 kids within 10, so it was like 10 and below. But anyway, I was telling the stories about open heart surgery one day, and they were so excited. They wanted to know everything about it from that day when I was in school.
Wow.
You know, at the hospital. And don't you know, it's what you tell your children and how vested you are in it, of your story, that will pass on. My daughter's an ER doc. My son is a crisis manager for mental health. So the answer is what you share with your children. They become vested in the feelings of behind the story, how you felt, how you loved who you were, what you did, or what you were about. That's really what we really wanted to have as a take-home message, don't you think?
Yeah. I do think, yes, that's so great that you told that story and how your daughter turned out. That's amazing. I laugh at that because I read Tacky the Penguin to my daughter and Dr. Seuss and you know, and with my adult books, the Cranky Super Powers books. Now I also have a children's book series, Snoodles. The first one, Snoodles, Cadoodles, Poodles, and lots and lots of noodles, and Snoodles in Space, and now a Snoodles in Space episode 2, the Zulus Strike Back. And so that's a completely different series, but that was from loving to read those silly books to my daughter. And I miss that. Actually, my daughter's 29 now, so it's hard to read those silly stories. So I end up writing them.
Yeah.
Because of that.
I think it's absolutely wonderful, Steve, in your book, Cranky Super Powers, because in essence, you're writing a silly book for adults. You're saying, hey, these are the silly parts of our lives, and can't we embrace them, right?
Yeah, and it was so much fun. Like so many different stories that people can relate to. I love redoing The Wizard of Oz, where the lion gets to eat the wizard. It's just when you get to write, you could I think the lion's going to get to eat the wizard. So fun like that. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, Stephen, could you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work? That would be great.
You could find me at stephenjosephauthor.com, and all my books are there. I have an award-winning blog on crankiness on that website. I also have the Defense Can Outrest Lawyers blog. So I have articles that are written over the years on legal stuff. Negotiation and stuff like that. But StephenJosephAuthor.com is all my kids' books, my adult books, my blog, everything's there.
Very good. Well, Stephen, it was a pleasure to have you with us here today. I absolutely love talking to you because this brings back memories, and it really is it's sort of like, do you remember when people used to talk over the kitchen table, come over, sit down, always have something to eat or drink, and we just sit here and talk, and that's what today felt like. So we thank you so much for sharing that memory with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It was great.
Thank you. If you'd like to find out more information about Stephen Joseph, again, the book is Cranky Super Powers we spoke about today. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to his website for more information. It is about remembering that life is a story, however you choose to write the words on the page. And it definitely is about being able to get out there and enjoy, use the words, and use your experience to share with others. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit drjeanettegallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.